Yo, what's going on? Camilo here. In this video, we're going to be doing a guide for Rosaria. It's been a while since I did a guide for her, and I haven't really seen many people do like any new guides for her. And she's coming out in the next banner with Raiden, so yeah, let's do an updated guide for Rosaria. So for her main role, she's going to be played as a sub DPS generally, and obviously she's a support too. She's going to be giving you a crit rate from her passive, and she can be a battery for cryo teams. She releases a lot of cryo particles, which is pretty good. And also if you have her C6, she could be a physical resistance shredder. That's generally the roles you'd want to play Rosaria in, but she's mainly like a support, you can say. Now for her talent priorities, you'd want to upgrade your elemental burst first. In all of the builds, this is going to be like your main source of damage, so yeah, you'd want to upgrade it first, and then you want to upgrade your elemental skill. You can also play Rosaria as a main DPS and upgrade her auto attacks first. Doesn't really recommend it. She's not really meant to be played like that, especially in the game right now. It's not really like an optimal team at all, but if you really like her, then it can be played. Her burst is just going to be dealing like instances of cryo damage, and your elemental skill is just going to deal damage to enemies. That's it. Her passives, the first passive is going to increase your crit rate by 12%. That's after you hit an opponent from behind with your elemental skill. And then the second passive, which is the most important one, is that it's going to allow you to give crit rate to all of the party members after you use your elemental burst, and the amount is going to be 15% from Rosaria's own crit rate with a maximum of 15%. So the maximum you can have is 100% crit rate. Other than that, it's going to be wasted. Alright, so now moving on to her constellations. The first constellation is just going to increase your attack speed and normal attacks damage. That's not really a good constellation for most of Rosaria's builds. It might be a good constellation if you're playing her as like a auto attacks main DPS, which as I said before is not really recommended. Other than that, it's not really super good. So yeah, I would say C1 is not really worth it. C2 is just going to increase the duration of your elemental burst. It's actually a good constellation. It just means more damage, more cryo applications, stuff like that. So yeah, it's pretty good, especially for C2 is kind of cheap, so I would say C2 is worth it. C3 is just going to increase the level of your elemental skill. Not really worth it. It's not really that much. You're just going to gain some damage, and it's not really going to be a lot. So yeah, C3 is not really worth it. C4 is just going to give you 5 extra energy. I would say it's cool, nothing really special. It's not really going to change anything or change how you build her or anything like that. It's just going to help you out with energy a little bit, so it's good, but it's not like a big deal or anything like that. So yeah, I would say C4 is good. Is it worth it or not? I'm not really sure. It's C4, so it's kind of expensive, but it's a good constellation. C5 is just going to increase the level of your elemental burst. That's basically just more damage. So yeah, I wouldn't really say it's worth it, especially for C5. And then finally, C6 is that after you use your elemental burst, it's going to decrease the opponent's physical resistance. So when you have her C6, you can use her as a support for a physical damage character, like Eula, for example, Razor, whatever. If that's what you want to use Rosaria on, then obviously it's a good constellation. The 20% resistance shred is definitely going to be pretty good. Other than that, it's going to be like a useless constellation. So yeah, I would say C6 is a good C6 in some teams, but in general, it's not going to be like a very versatile constellation. So yeah, I would say it's cool, but it's definitely not worth it. Alright, so now moving on to her weapons. So generally speaking, her weapons are going to be like two main categories, damage weapons and support weapons. For the damage weapons, pretty much all of the 5 stars are going to be good, except for the Engulfing Lightning and the Skyward. Other than that, you have the Staff of Homa. It's probably going to be the best in the slot. You have the new Staff of Scarlet Sands. It's going to be a very good weapon on her too. The Jade Wing Spear, the Vortex, all of these are going to be pretty good. The Calamity Queller. These weapons are going to give her like the top damage. The crit rate weapons like the Jade Wing Spear and the Staff of Scarlet Sands might not really be good in a freeze team because you're not really going to need as much crit rate, but in a melt team, they're going to be super good. Even in a freeze team, you can actually use them if you want to like max out your crit rate to give the maximum support to your teammates. So yeah, they're still going to be viable and they're going to be like top weapons. You have the Wave Breaker's Fin and the Catch. These are mainly going to buff your elemental burst damage, which is, as I said before, your main source of damage. So they're actually going to be very decent weapons too, especially if you have refinements on them. They're going to be very, very good. The Catch is going to give you less damage, obviously, but you're going to have energy recharge too, which is pretty good. You can also use the Dragon's Bane, but only in a melt team, because it's going to give you elemental mastery, which you're going to need. And also it's going to increase the damage against opponents affected by pyro, so you're going to need to use it on a melt team. But yeah, it's definitely going to be a pretty good weapon on melt teams. You have the Deathmatch and the Blackcliff Bowl. These are always going to be good as like crit options, so if you need crit damage or crit rate, you can always go for them. They might not really be like super good on damage, especially for Rosaria, but they're gonna balance out your crit, which is pretty good. Now for support weapons, you can use the Favonius. This is like the most obvious option. It's gonna give you energy recharge, and then it's gonna help out all of your team with energy. So as like a full support Rosaria, when you don't care about her damage, using the Favonius is actually gonna be a very good idea, especially because usually she's gonna be used as like a battery, so that's gonna help a lot. You can also use anything with energy recharge to make sure you have like your elemental bursts on a good uptime. For example, the catch or the engulfing lightning or the skyward. All of these are gonna be viable options if you want to like only focus on support, because you want to make sure you have your elemental bursts on a very good uptime. And also, as I said before, if you want to max out her crit, because you'd want to give the most crit to your teammates, you don't want to cap out your crit at 100%. So in that case, you'd want to have crit rate weapons like the Deathmatch, for example, or the Staff of Scarlet Sands, the Primordial Jade. All of these can be considered like support weapons, because they're going to give you crit rate and they're going to give crit rate to your teammate. And this is pretty good because they're going to help you out with damage too, as we've seen before, but they're also going to be like considered kind of like support weapons. Alright, so now moving on to her artifact sets. I just want to say, guys, if you haven't subscribed yet, then please subscribe to the channel. Thank you. But yeah, for her artifact sets, it's going to be kind of like specific. It really depends on which theme you want to use her in. And each like use is going to have like a different artifact set pretty much. So if you want to use her in a freeze theme, you'd want to use the 4-piece Blizzard. That's going to be the obvious option. It's going to give you a lot of crit rate and cryo damage bonus, which is pretty good. In freeze themes, this is definitely the top set, so you definitely want to use it. Any other sets are not really going to compare to the 4-piece Blizzard and freeze themes. A more general set is going to be like the Emblem Severed Fate. It's just going to give you energy recharge and then increase your elemental burst damage. That's going to be a very good option too. Maybe not as good on like freeze teams, but it's going to be a general option. It can be used in any team. But you'd want to make sure you have a little bit of extra energy recharge, more than usual, because your energy recharge is going to turn into elemental burst damage. So you want to have like some extra substats and stuff like that to make sure you're getting like good elemental burst damage bonus. If you're using her in a meld team, you can use the 4-piece Lava Walker. It's going to increase your damage against enemies affected by Pyro. And in a meld team, you're going to be reverse melting with Rosaria. So you want to affect enemies by Pyro and then attack them with Rosaria. That means all of your damage coming from Rosaria is going to be increased by 35%. So yeah, it's definitely going to be a very good set. But it's only going to work on meld teams, and you want to make sure the enemy is affected by Pyro before you hit them. Now, if you want to use her for like full support, you can use the 4-piece Noblesse. It's going to be a very good set. Obviously it's going to give you attack to all of your teammates, so it's a very good support set, but it's also going to increase your elemental burst damage from the 2-piece. So it's going to help you out with damage and also going to be like a very good support set. Obviously that if you're not using anyone else with the 4-piece Noblesse. And yeah, you can use something like the 2-piece Blizzard and 2-piece Noblesse as like a general set. It's just going to increase your elemental burst damage, which is pretty good. So yeah, these are generally the sets. As I said before, you'd want to look at your teams and see what set is going to work best. Or you can use like a more general set and then forget about it. Now moving on to her artifact stats. For the main stats, you'd want to use attack percent, energy recharge, or elemental mastery on your sands, cryo damage bonus on your goblet, and then crit rate or crit damage on your circlet. For the sands, generally speaking, you want to use attack to get more damage. If you lack energy recharge, then you might want to use energy recharge, even though it's not really recommended or necessary. But if you really need energy recharge, then maybe go for it on your sands. And if you're using her in a meld team and you don't have like enough elemental mastery and you have enough attack buffs and stuff like that, you might use elemental mastery on your sands. Again, it's not really recommended. Attack is generally the better option in most cases, but energy recharge and elemental mastery are going to be viable options too if you need them. But yeah, for the circlet, you generally want to use crit rate or crit damage. For freeze team, obviously you'd want to go for crit damage, or maybe, as I said before, if you want to max out like her support capabilities, you can go for a crit rate circlet to like max out your crit rate, you know, have it at 100%. So yeah, if you're using her as like a full support, go for a crit rate circlet. If you're using her for damage, then you're gonna see what you need and then decide. For the substats, it's just the usual. You'd want to get crit, both crit rate and crit damage. As I said before, decide between them. You'd want to get attack, energy recharge, and then maybe some elemental mastery and like meld teams. In freeze teams, you don't need elemental mastery, but in meld teams, you might need a little bit. Now, for the final stats you want to have on your Rosaria, you'd want your crit rate to sit around higher than like the usual characters. You'd want it to sit around 60 to 100% crit rate. As I said before, she's going to be supporting your teammates from her crit rate, so having a lot of crit rate on on her is going to be beneficial to the rest of your team. Crit damage, try to get like double of your crit rate, but if you cannot, it's going to be fine because you're going to be having a lot of crit rate anyways. Energy recharge, you'd want to sit around 130 to maybe around 180. You can get away with 130 in some cases if you have her like C4 for example, and you're using her in a like double cryo team, or maybe you're using her in a field for a long time and stuff like that. But generally speaking, it might get around to like 180 to be able to use her as like at full comfort. If you're using her as like a pure support and stuff like that and you don't want to think about her, in that case you might get a lot of energy recharge to make sure she always has her burst. Elemental mastery, as I said before, you only need it in like melt teams. If you're using her in a melt team, you don't want to get around like 200 elemental mastery and that's it. You don't want to stack it or anything like that. Just get 200. It's going to help you out damage and you're done. Alright, so now moving on to her team comp. So as I said before, she has mainly like fixed teams and you can change the characters and that's it. Either you'd want to use her in a freeze team or melt team, or maybe as like a support battery for any cryo or something like that. So freeze team is going to look like a freeze DPS, for example Ayaka or Kea or whatever. And then let's say Rosaria, and then a Hydra enabler like Mona, Xingqiu, whoever. And then you'd want to use an Anemo like Kazuha for example, or Sucrose or anyone else. So yeah, this is a freeze team. Rosaria is just going to be helping out your cryo main DPS with the cryo resonance, and she's also going to be like a battery and she's going to help him out with the crit rate. That's it. Melt teams, you can use her with like a pyro DPS, for example Sean Link, and then Rosaria, and then let's say Bennett, and then another Anemo like Kazuha for example, or Sucrose or whatever. In that case, Rosaria is going to be a reverse melting and she's going to be dealing damage through elemental burst, and yeah, you're going to be dealing a lot of damage. That's usable on any like pyro main DPS like D-Look for example, whoever. As I said before, if you want to use her as like a support for a physical character, if you have her C6, for example like Eula, Rosaria, then Fischl, and then Bennett, she can actually work on this team even if she's C0. She's going to be a pretty good support for Rosaria. She's still going to give you a crit rate and stuff like that. But if you have her C6, she's going to be like more directed towards physical teams. These are mainly the main teams. Maybe and sometimes you can use her with like her auto attacks with Chongyun to make sure you always have like cryo applied, and then use another pyro to melt your hits. These are not really like her meta teams. She's gonna be kind of replaceable on this type of teams. So yeah, I didn't really include them. So yeah, that was the video guys. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel. If you want to say anything, leave it in the comments, and see y'all in the next video. Peace.